In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro discusses the finalization of President Trump's cabinet selections, emphasizing the strategic nature of these appointments and their implications for the upcoming administration. Shapiro begins by highlighting the withdrawal of Matt Gaetz from consideration for Attorney General, a decision influenced by both internal party dynamics and Gaetz's controversial history. Gaetz faced significant opposition in the Senate due to ongoing ethics investigations and his contentious relationship with House leadership. Recognizing the lack of support for Gaetz, Trump opted for a more conventional choice, Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida and a longtime ally. Shapiro praises Bondi's conservative credentials and her loyalty to Trump, noting her history of defending him during various scandals. Shapiro elaborates on Bondi's expected approach to the Department of Justice, suggesting that she will work to align the Department of Justice more closely with Trump's agenda. He discusses the concept of the deep state, referring to career bureaucrats who may resist the president's directives. Shapiro argues that Bondi's appointment signals a commitment to reforming the Department of Justice and purging it of individuals who do not share Trump's vision. He cites Project 2025, which outlines plans for a comprehensive overhaul of the executive branch, as evidence of the administration's intent to reshape government institutions. The podcast also covers Trump's selection of Scott Bessent as Secretary of the Treasury. Shapiro describes Bessent's background as a hedge fund manager with ties to prominent Democratic figures, including George Soros. Despite his past affiliations, Shapiro argues that Bessent's expertise in macroeconomic analysis and his commitment to tax cuts align with Trump's economic goals. Bessent's proposed 333 plan aims to reduce the budget deficit, stimulate GDP growth, and increase oil production, reflecting a pragmatic approach to economic policy. Shapiro discusses other key appointments, including Sebastian Gorka as Deputy Assistant to the President for Counterterrorism and Dr. Marty Makary as head of the Food and Drug Administration. Gorka's hawkish stance on radical Islam is highlighted as a necessary perspective in the ongoing fight against terrorism. Meanwhile, Makary's track record as a COVID-19 skeptic positions him to reform the Food and Drug Administration and restore public trust in the agency. Shapiro emphasizes the importance of these appointments in addressing both national security and public health concerns. While most of Trump's cabinet selections are met with approval, Shapiro expresses concern over the nomination of Lori Chavez-DeRemer for Labor Secretary. He critiques her endorsements from prominent Democrats and labor leaders, suggesting that her support for pro-union legislation could undermine free market principles. Shapiro warns that the Department of Labor has significant influence over business practices in the U.S., making this a critical appointment to watch. Shapiro shifts the discussion to the international stage, criticizing President Biden's handling of foreign policy. He argues that Biden's lack of decisive leadership has created a vacuum that adversaries like Russia and Iran are exploiting. The podcast highlights recent escalations in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, with Ukraine launching attacks inside Russia using U.S. munitions. Shapiro contends that Biden's failure to provide adequate support to Ukraine has prolonged the war and resulted in unnecessary casualties. The conversation also touches on the International Criminal Court's recent arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Shapiro condemns the International Criminal Court's actions as politically motivated and anti-Semitic, arguing that the court has become a tool for dictatorial regimes to target democratic leaders. He emphasizes the absurdity of the International Criminal Court issuing warrants against Israeli officials, while ignoring the actions of terrorist organizations like Hamas. Shapiro concludes by discussing the rise of anti-Semitic protests in cities like Montreal and Toronto, linking these events to a broader trend of radical leftist ideology gaining traction in Western democracies. He criticizes Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for his lack of leadership during these protests, contrasting it with Trump's anticipated approach to governance. Shapiro expresses optimism about the incoming administration's potential to restore order and address the challenges facing both the U.S. and its allies.